Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today we have Piper Foster Wilder as the guest on the show. She's the founder and CEO of 60hertz Microgrids. This company develops software to maintain microgrids, from village infrastructure to remote industrial sites to resiliency microgrids on the critical infrastructure. The company has won more than 7 national and international awards for their work. In 2020, she became a Tory Burch Foundation Fellow, and she came to Alaska to serve as a deputy director of Renewable Energy Alaska Project in Anchorage. There, she became acquainted with the opportunity and challenges of project development, financing, and maintaining remote power grids. She's previously the vice president of Amatis Controls, an IoT company, and she was named Aspen Magazine's 10 Women of Aspen. She is a Humboldt Fellow and has worked at Ecological Institute of Berlin for several years and authored several papers on siting of utility-scale renewables. She currently lives in Anchorage with her husband and 3-year-old daughter. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
So the space that you're in is you mentioned that it's relatively niche. Can you describe why you think it's niche?
Yeah, truly. So, as you said in the intro, when I came to Alaska, despite having a history working in renewable energy, it was the first time I'd ever heard the term microgrid. And Alaska has 200 indigenous Alaska Native communities. 200 Native communities that are effectively microgrids. The state is so big, even though we often depict it on the map as like an island floating off the coast of California. Alaska is actually, larger than the entire lower 48. And so when I got here, it was the first time I'd seen what life in remote villages looked like, and that it would actually be impossible to bring utility infrastructure to such a large landmass. So there were microgrids there, and I was really concerned about the diesel dependence that these sites had, because it drives up energy costs, yielding a kilowatt hour price that would be 4 to 5 to 10 times what most of us in an urban place are paying, especially painful in communities that don't have a lot of economic activity. So I initially started the company in order to finance renewable energy assets that were in these very remote, very distributed sites. But on the way to that goal, we discovered that without a proper maintenance solution for renewable energy, for remote assets, that it would be a waste of investor dollars. The failure rate was high. And so at that point, I had brought aboard a co-founder, and we sat in on project demos of other CMMS software to see if we couldn't just fulfill that gap by buying it. But indeed, none of those other CMMS solutions were a fit. And so with the naivete of being non-technical founders, we said, great, we'll just make our own, which I can tell you lots of stories about why that may have been a misguided decision. But nonetheless, we founded a business on it, ultimately pivoted, dropped the project finance activity. And so our niche over the last 3 years really has been microgrid maintenance. Microgrids are in many places, not just Alaska, but of course all over the developing world, emerging markets, sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, but increasingly even in urban places as a backup for the central utility grid. People probably remember, of course, California wildfires over the last years and the threat to our utility infrastructure, as well as keeping the lights on for people. But then increasingly also, we saw this with maintenance issues for ERCOT in Texas when that freak ice storm rolled through in February. So microgrids are a resiliency technique if you are a utility. All this to say, 60hertz, our software now, is for the maintenance of distributed energy resources, distributed energy assets. That can be a microgrid. It can also be a big solar array. It can be utility scale wind. And so our jam is really in energy maintenance. It's a kind of overlooked category. And this is what we're really enthusiastic about.
So I first came across the word microgrid probably just not too long ago. And my understanding of a microgrid is just kind of a typical energy grid, but scaled down and typically reliant on things like solar. Is that a correct
I think that's
definition?
a totally fair definition. To be candid, the industry itself is a little confused about how to define it.
Okay, gotcha.
But we see lots of sort of hand waving around it. But yes, it would be a mini electricity grid where you're going to have some central box. Usually, there's often a diesel generator as a backup, and then a site-specific renewable, site-appropriate renewable being solar, wind, even a little hydro project. If we're at a large industrial site, like a big mine or oil and gas activity, then the genset definitely will be a part of the microgrid. But as diesel fuel is expensive to both transport and to operate with, people are looking for more renewables.
So prior to the creation of your work, who it typically is the type of person that would manage a
Yeah,
microgrid?
that's that we were curious too. So often, this is what gets to the human and the impact component. What 60 Hertz is an impact company, but usually it will be a local lay person who has been tapped to look after these expensive, huge, noisy, often intimidating energy assets. And so, recruiting some poor soul in the community to come and be the power plant operator, in some cases they would have had a bit of formal training. This is in, particularly remote sites. Otherwise, they might get sent off to a 2-week, 2-month boot camp to learn about diesel generator maintenance or wind turbine maintenance. Great. In other cases, particularly as we see power for health clinics in the emerging market, the doctor or the nurse may be out back looking in on the
Hmm.
inverter for that solar battery array or double checking that the batteries are functioning as they should. And that's a really exciting use case for us because we are designing software that is uniquely with a lower literacy user interface, which also can mean people new to technology, not just those that may not be strong
Hmm.
readers, but someone new to technology or new to the asset that they're maintaining. I like to say I'm not very mechanical. I'm not very good actually at troubleshooting. I'm getting better at it, but even fixing my car or the record player, I probably would be the last one you'd want to talk to. And so if I can figure out using our software how to fix something, I think that's a good stand-in for many of our users.
When I think about the idea of maintaining a source of power delivery, I think about the cockpit of an airplane. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen one, but it's like full of dials, knobs, buttons, switches. And I just feel like, how the heck does anyone know what's going on? Is that a
I
close
love that
approximation
metaphor. I
to
might
what
steal
people
it. I
most
might
likely?
steal it. That's a perfect
Okay,
metaphor.
yeah, go
Yeah,
for
no,
it.
I love it. I love it because it is, and even if there aren't quite so many dials and buzzers and things inside,
Right.
it's going to explode if you push the wrong thing. I think that is actually often something that we hear from new operators, new power
Mhm.
operators. Is there's a great fear that it is going to explode, whatever it is, and and it's not wrong. Like a diesel genset has a lot of fuel in it. A battery is effectively a bomb. We love to talk about lithium ion batteries, and we're increasingly becoming closer and closer to them. They're in many of our products, and increasingly a power wall, or the batteries are everywhere. But it fundamentally is a very small container of a lot of energy, and so we do need to be
Mhm.
careful with how we're treating these. So that's all the more reason why proper training is critical for getting newcomers to our maintenance field familiar with how to look after a power asset. We have a special thesis around women in maintenance because globally the field is largely it's a male profession for whatever reason. We think the studies project 800,000 new entry level jobs in energy globally over coming years. And if we stay on track with where the projections are going, that will be 75 to 80% males that hold those positions. And so if we can bring that into more of a 50-50 balance, we think there's some
Mhm.
benefit, but that takes some encouragement. I mean, even of the 225 operators that are on our platform using our software today to do their maintenance work, only 6 are women. And there's a lot of opportunity there to encourage more females to the role.
So is the goal of your platform to abstract away the large sums of knowledge you have to know to operate a machine and try to abstract it away to a centralized, I don't know, like control panel that's controlled by, I guess, experts or AI? Is
Well,
that the
sort
idea?
of. I think so. So first things first, there are a lot of people, especially in the energy space, that are doing maintenance. They say, "Well, we've already got a monitoring platform." And like that's the big fallacy. Like we all hear the phrase operations and maintenance as synonyms, but they're two very different
Hmm.
functions. And so we
Right.
complement a maintenance, rather a monitoring platform. Um, when we talk about a culture of maintenance, then that is broken into preventative maintenance, going through checking things, making sure everything is functioning properly, recording values. That's a lot of what 60 Hertz does, where absent our platform, people would have used a piece of paper and a clipboard and a pencil to
Mm,
accomplish
I
the
see.
work. And so it's that PM activity, but then it's also taking corrective action. And that's getting at what you were touching on, where learning how to troubleshoot, learning how to fix something, learning, even having some step-by-step guides in any manual, in your owner's manual in your vehicle. You've probably said, what does this mean? What should I do to diagnose it? And, you followed some basic troubleshooting routine. We would like to help people do that using some templates that will create asset specific for a customer. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I imagine the different types of microgrids can just be very wide in their styling, the layout of like buttons, their control panels. I imagine they can be totally different from one model to another. Is that
Yes and
right?
no. Yes and no. The hardware is
Okay.
standardizing. So, typically if there'll be a
I see.
generator and a control panel for the assets in general, and then certain types of batteries, wind inverters. So it's a fairly discrete set of asset types. However, then you've got lots of make and model and manufacturers. And so that's something, just as a company, that we're flirting with is, can we create a series of templates so that, if you've got any of the following 5 kinds of generators, here are common questions, PM questions, and troubleshooting routines you should be asking
Hmm.
about. Same with wind, blah, blah, blah. We don't know yet if that's going to prove true. There's a small, a nuance that is within this, is the layout of a powerhouse or a microgrid differ. And so if you're conducting a checklist on your 60 hertz app within a tablet, and you're going to that corner of the room and then back to this corner of the room just to follow the order of the questions, that's not helpful. But you'd rather work, systematically as your powerhouse is laid out. So what can we do in a software to facilitate a more logical workflow?
So you mentioned that people use the software on tablets. Do you ever find that a lack of tablets in a specific region is a constraint from people in using and
Well,
adopting your platform?
so there was a fascinating Wall Street Journal article in 2017 that was formative as we created the initial prototype, which was the cost. It's called The End of Typing, if anyone wants to look it up. So it's called, it said the cost of smartphones is decreasing globally so much
Mhm.
that you can get a cheap Android at a very basic income level. But can the user of that Android read well? Are they new to technology? A lot of this core,
I see.
that was a thesis that really shaped our concept about let's go beyond an accessible user interface. That's for people that may have a vision impairment or whatnot. But let's go beyond
Mhm.
that to someone who is brand new to technology, brand new to maintenance, brand new to the asset, or who, many of our users are elderly. They haven't been to an optometrist because they live so far away from a hub community. They can't see
I
well. So
see.
there are lots of ways to compensate for that. So form factor of tablets and phones, we're getting a sense of, most of our users only want to spend $200 to $300 for a tablet. And so then the replacement rate is high. Yeah,
I see.
start over again on the tablet just won't last that long. But we did significant field testing with the way that influences the software is, okay, if I'm using a cheap tablet, and you're taking a photo, a lot of what we facilitate is field data capture, and like my hands are not perfectly steady, the photos are
Mm.
chronically blurry, which can be an issue.
Right.
Whereas that stabilization mechanism is something you get when the hardware costs more. So we've done a lot of testing with various make and models to determine, how we can compensate for that cheaper form factor of tablet.
And you mentioned that these users are people who live in potentially remote parts of, like, I guess, more
Yeah.
rural regions. How do you find
Well,
them?
our customers tend to be utility companies, project developers, and similar. So our customer would be employing
I
would be
see.
employing those individuals, but the nature of this work is very understudied and interesting. We've invested 275, actually approaching 300 hours of human-centered design field research, where I flew out with an anthropologist and with my
Mhm.
nursing infant several years ago to a community far above the Arctic Circle, in a little float plane, and we spent 8 hours interviewing the operators in this particular community to understand, what is your life like? What is the worst part of your life? What is the best part of your life?
Mhm.
How do you feel honored? How do you feel acknowledged? What do you wish? If you had a magic wand, what would you do? Asking these kinds of questions in order to derive an understanding of what our product should accomplish. And some of the most interesting observations that have come in working with indigenous communities, with working with remote and very rural people, a couple of things come to mind to share. For starters, and this is kind of dark, but the likelihood of death is much higher in these rural areas. We work with operators that whether it's a hunting accident, whether it is danger crossing an ice road across the Arctic where the seasonal thaw is changing, and so the ability to travel on ice roads is changing. Some of our work in sub-Saharan Africa are in communities where people are in conflict zones where it's actually quite dangerous for them to get between Lagos and the region that they're living in. So you'd like to limit the number of trips they have to take or that their supervisor must take out to the community because they'll be traveling through conflict. A number of our users on the industrial side, the likelihood of seeing a colleague killed by being backed over by an accident at work is far greater. This is very dangerous work that if we are only living and working in very urban areas, where like carpal tunnel is your biggest risk, that's a huge difference. Other observations that we found for new users of technology is like a very great fear of making a mistake, where that you can just close the app or back out or just like mend it. The operator is very concerned that they've made a mistake or hampering something or doing something really wrong that they might be criticized for. So how can we give them affirmation through our user interface that they're doing the right thing? And as well, just really heartfelt, tender points about how we feel acknowledged in our work and in our life. This was a foundational point for me in starting 60 Hertz, is that wish to be contributing more. I think if you've ever been unemployed, even for a few months, you have so much capacity and so much that you want to give, and yet may not have the venue to do that. And so for many of our operators, they may be working part-time, they may not be having a full-time job. No one is there saying like, hey, great work, or wow, we really appreciated that you kept the lights on in your community for the last 24 days uninterrupted. Those kind of kudos are far and few between, and there may not be a culture of complimenting where you live anyway. And yet this is so fundamental to people feeling value. I mean, work is one of the primary ways that we feel good about ourselves in our lives, period. So this is a place where I think the computerized maintenance management software world, CMMS, 60 Hertz is a type of CMMS. I think we contribute a lot to helping people who are largely unsung, but are fairly fundamental in any caring profession. I think these are the nurses of infrastructure, that these individuals really do need to be elevated and praised for their work, and that's something that our platform does.
So you called 60 Hertz an impact company previously. Do you have a special meaning around that terminology?
Yeah.
Well, what's the impact that you care the most about within the scope of
Oh, there
your
are lots of
company?
ways to look at it, but we are a social impact investment. So that's measured in terms of, we aim to achieve commercial returns. Our exit valuations are just as high as any other software company, or our projections, I should say. The difference or the way that we come in at the impact twofold. So for starters, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, we hit on that related to decent work. And so this means, are we helping people attain a job and sustain it? Are they able to stay in a good job? And are they able to advance through their job? And that might be measured through the ability to get a promotion within their same company, the ability to be recognized for on-time work, for helping mentor or work with a peer. These are the kinds of impacts that help keep people employed and help them retain the wealth that job is providing and do good things with it. Similarly, in places that are where our customers are utility companies or project developers, is the cost of electricity in their community remaining level or going down? If they have a proper maintenance routine, then electricity should be cheaper for the developer or the utility to provide, and ultimately that tariff certainly should not go up. And then is it more reliable? With their well-known national indicators, international indicators on the average duration of a power outage event, we help keep track of that because proper maintenance keeps the lights on longer. And then when it comes to just dignity with work, we think about, even for our very urban customers that are calling around servicing backup diesel generators, where you wouldn't necessarily see a greenhouse gas impact or whatnot, are we helping that more blue collar individual feel the sense of attainment and worth and contribution that each of us deserves?
Was this idea and philosophy of an impact company something you had from day
I
one?
think so. I mean, the notion of impact corporations is, of course, widespread, and we looked initially at the work of Mohammed Yunus, and my co-founder had worked at Grameen Bank prior to joining 60 Hertz.
Hmm.
So this concept of like doing well by doing good is certainly that had been a thesis. I was really moved, having not been born in Alaska and just relatively recently moving here. We many of us know well that life and conditions in Native American communities is very difficult and hard. And when I came to Alaska, I had been unaware of that for the Alaska Native communities, just the degree to which some individuals may have a much bigger uphill battle to fight than certainly I can say in my own life. I am the beneficiary of nothing but abundance and blessing from wonderful parents, and I feel so grateful and really responsible for what the platform that has given me. So looking at things like adverse childhood experiences and some of the emerging research about how people who have faced extreme levels of abuse or neglect or addiction or been around that in their rearing, how challenging that is for their success and thriving going forward. And that's not just an Alaska Native or Native American thing. This is across the map. Like the ACEs scores among people that may not be something that many people are aware of, but an adverse childhood experience score is often surprisingly high. And once we start understanding this, it explains a lot, as well as how we start crafting solutions. I'm really interested in policy that is informed by research so that we can make good decisions with how we spend public money, or such that startups like mine that want to make a difference can do so in a manner that will be effective.
Is there a specific interaction or moment that you remember having when, call it in like your early days of Alaska, where something just really hit you emotionally, where you're like, I saw something that I never expected to see, or I read about it in the past but never understood the weight of it until I experienced it or at least semi-personally?
Yeah, and so many. I appreciate the question a lot. I think a couple stories come to mind. I had met my husband. It was just a boyfriend at the time, and he said, "I'm about to go on this big expedition. Why don't you come with us?" And so it was. It was a good adventure. I said yes to. I was like, I mean, it's a good thing I had no idea what I was getting in for, but off we headed. I flew to a small community called Point Hope, which is the northwesternmost community in North America. It's a very small Inupiaq village. And I got off of an airplane, a little tiny float plane. I think I traveled for 3.5 days to get there. And there was my boyfriend, Nathaniel, waiting, and the wind was blowing sideways. And we walked from this little airstrip into the community, and then proceeded with some good friends, his good friends, to then walk for 12 days down an Arctic coastline to another community. And so we saw amazing wildlife and bears, and I was like totally infatuated with this guy. But the thing that made the biggest impact was the community. I had no idea about living conditions and about the cost of groceries in the grocery store and how poor the water tasted, and all of these things. It was really moving to me. Fast forward, I ultimately got a saddle on that horse and we got married. It took some doing with my husband, but we got married 1.5 years later, and I was a good sport and moved to Alaska and left my life in Colorado. And
I'm not sure many people do that.
I wasn't sure either. I think I should get some points, but I have an amazing husband. So anyway, it was I thought I would just come for a few years, but upon moving here, getting the job working at Renewable Energy Alaska Project, and our life evolved here, I think seeing the living conditions, the impact on a daily basis, and then knowing from my energy background that diesel dependence was like doing nothing to help the situation when people were paying over half of their household income what little they did have for energy costs. I was like, this is a solvable problem. We've got a lot of renewable energy that works even in the cold and dark. Why aren't we doing this? And so it was with that spirit. I always say it was with hubris that I started the company to solve this, even though I've since gotten a lot more humility about how hard it is to supplant diesel, particularly in an Arctic environment. All this to say, as the platform evolved, we then went out and had a training. I was helping train some early users on our app and flew to another community where operators had come in, power plant operators had come in order to get the 60 hertz training. And one of the gentlemen showed up 2 hours late into the training and was clearly intoxicated and having a challenge. And I just had so much compassion for him because it was clear that he wanted and needed this good job and was struggling with the addiction. I have, have been close to people that are addicted to, whatever it is that they're addicted to. It is a very, very hard challenge. And so what it takes to ultimately, keep ourselves on a good track. As he did become a 60 hertz user and was on our platform, and as things evolved, I ultimately started hearing more stories about what having an operator who is responsible for the power plant, for the microgrid in a little community means. There were stories about a dentist who was traveling from a hub community out to perform a root canal in this same community, but the lights were flickering so badly that he couldn't see to get his work done or operate his tools. Had to call back to the central community. Can anything be done? What can we do to get the operator to go and see what's going on? He hadn't been in a position to properly maintain his generators. It's just, there are such human impacts when you're looking at a little tiny electricity grid at a village scale that are challenging. Sadly, this same operator that I'm talking about passed on some months after all of this, and he's not the first operator that we've lost. So it is very human and very personal, I think, for my team and for me. And not to dwell only on the difficulty, there are also just beautiful, far more beautiful examples of individuals who are so capable, who are so able to rise to an occasion, who will travel upriver to another community to help pitch in and resolve an issue, to mentor one another. Again, the women that are on the platform, there are so many more instances of phenomenal human capacity and resourcefulness. I don't only want to delve, it's just that those more tender-hearted examples, I think, are also what really compel me and this team to be pursuing the thesis.
I'm not sure if there's any research done on it, but one of my core values of life is just the fact that I think to spark the positive cycle of compassion, you just need to invest a ton into it. And I would like to believe that when you show loving kindness to someone, they're more predisposed, maybe not like forced to, but more predisposed to show loving kindness to people in their lives. And I think that's heavily underrated, and I think it's unfortunately not something that can really be measured by numbers.
Yeah, what a beautiful thesis. I mean, even the nature of your work with this podcast is, of course, extending that compassion and help. And I don't know how you would put a number on it, but I agree. It seems like an intuitive law of gravity that we all respond to and know. I think there's metaphysics around that probably.
How does your day-to-day now in Alaska contrast, I guess, to day-to-day life prior to moving? How different are they? What are the biggest elements of difference?
That's a good question. Where to even start with that? I think on a personal level, I came from Aspen in Colorado, which is a very wealthy, probably unrealistic environment, and I enjoyed my time living there, and still love going back. But what had chafed me at first in moving to Anchorage, but what I now really appreciate and value, is just the reality as well as the diversity of socioeconomic classes that live in Alaska. Anchorage has more than 110 languages spoken in the schools, and some of the most diverse neighborhoods in the country. It is really a rich environment in a far different way than Aspen was a rich environment. So I appreciate the ways that I've changed in the course of this move and this transition. We still go back and forth a fair amount, also because half of my team is in Denver. And with some of our work, the time change is helpful just to be a little bit closer, because Alaska is several hours behind even mountain time. So that's one way that life has changed. I think I'm evolving, as a professional, and as I age in my career or advance in my career, finding out how to be more effective, finding out how to work differently, to be actually a lot more humble than I was earlier. just much more keenly aware of how often I'm wrong or how often I may not exactly have it right in terms of a conclusion or an evaluation. That's actually quite freeing.
When you mentioned that Aspen is unrealistic, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so many ways, and I hope that no one from Aspen is listening. But likely, if anybody ever does, they would probably understand. I think when I first moved there in 2005, people said, "Well, in Aspen, you usually either have two houses or two jobs." And I was definitely in the two jobs category the entire time I was there. But what that means in terms of a social life is something I've thought a lot about. Is that the way that in Aspen or in more wealthy, certainly, that's not the only place, but many of these more well-to-do environments, that the social skills someone has are, I would categorize as country club social skills. And what that would mean is to know the type of conversation to lead, how long to linger on a subject, how proximate you would act emotionally with the person you're talking to, and the frequency of jokes. Those are all kinds of like examples of country club social skills. Whereas what I hope for my own daughter, and what I have been grateful to think about more in our move to Alaska, are what I call church social skills. So the ability to, like build a really deep, authentic relationship with someone through spending time together, to be more about listening, to dwell on questions, that it is okay to talk about work and ask about what kind of work life, to help one another, that it's a social network based on experience and help, as opposed to a network. And that's a subtle but really critical difference. I worry about this with millennials. I mean, even I'm just north of the millennial age bracket, but as I see some of my younger employees and relatives, I worry that, just a few years back from those of us that are of my generation, that they're just a few years back, like I just missed a lot of my life being on social media. And the impact of that is, when it comes to sincerity, attention span, authenticity, it really makes me paranoid, because I definitely perceive that difference. I don't know if they can see it, but it worries me for my daughter a little bit too. Just, like the milk of how we connect with one another is, don't you think? I mean, are you experiencing this too? I can't tell
Definitely.
what generation you're in, but
I have a younger sister, and I think she technically classifies as Gen Z, and I'm at the cusp of Gen Z millennial, and she's for sure on the Gen Z side. And I think the amount of time just like staring at a phone just like mind boggles me. Nowadays I try to avoid my phone as much as possible, just because I feel like unless I'm reading a book that I think is highly beneficial for my mind, almost everything else on my phone is urgent but unimportant.
I love that. Yeah, exactly. Or one that you kind of like wish you didn't have to deal with. What are you doing instead? If you're not on your phone, what would you rather be, or how are you electing to devote your attention?
So I'm trying to use my phone in such a way I don't look at my phone, because I think the phones are still a powerful tool. Like the fact that you have connectivity, if you're in a generally well-connected area, connectivity to the public knowledge, the sum of all public knowledge, and at the tip of your fingers. And I think that's just a powerful thing. But I think to wield it well, you need to have a lot of time where you're just spent alone and just thinking, as opposed to trying to listen to what other people are trying to post out into the world. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think on a previous podcast today, someone was telling me how on social media sites like Facebook, fake news is more viral by a factor of like 7x or 8x compared to real news. So most of the stuff you read may or may not even be true. And I feel like I don't want to spend my life consuming not true statements. You'll start building a not true view of the world. You'll start tackling or thinking about problems that don't exist.
Wow. Think about, exactly. And then devoting energy and thought and attention to problems that don't exist.
Right.
That's fascinating.
And I have this major concern for people in my generation and younger. The depression rates will be really high because people look at social media and think to themselves, I'm not what other people put as their front. I'm not like that. And of course you can't be like that.
They aren't either.
Most of life is exactly. But I think the human brain hasn't evolved to get to the point where we can, for our brain to overcome that and still be satisfied with what we have in life.
That really resonates. I'm concerned too about just the sense of purposelessness and depression, and And it's the Montessori. I'm thinking a lot about Montessori curriculum because of my little one, and that they say for
Mhm.
parents that you want to shift instead of saying like, "What a great drawing! You drew that beautifully." Like, "Oh, you look pretty." That it's not about my interpretation of who you are, what you did, but rather is the child satisfied with what they did? And I think that parallel
Mhm.
really reflects back to what social media has done too. And yet I can't figure out an escape hatch on it. I mean, I don't know. I really worry. I don't know what the next 20 years will look like. What do you think?
Um, I'm not optimistic for society, but I am
It's
optimistic
over.
for those who are self-aware and choose. I mean, at some level, I don't consider myself responsible for everyone's decisions. It's
True,
impossible to
true.
be. So I figured, like, okay, what can I do for myself? What I can do for those who I care about and love, and just to be there when I'm with them. Like, I really try to make it a statement not to have my phone like right in front of my face when like we're
Yeah.
spending time together. And all my friends know I'm an awful texter. If you want to get a hold of me, invite me over, or even invite yourself over to my house. I'll cook for you. You can cook for me. Whatever. Either way is fine. And I think that's what I think connection is really built
Mm,
around, like those shared
shared.
physical spaces. And I absolutely love being a host of this show. I love talking to a bunch of people across this podcast. But it's not the same as if I invited you and your husband, your
For
daughter to
dinner.
come over for dinner. Like, it's just
Yeah,
really
yeah.
different.
It
Yeah.
would be a potluck. We would bring our own salads. We would contribute. But I really value that. I really hear you, and I'm the same. It's like I really just nothing worse than getting a text message that you have to reply to. It's just so much nicer to have that shared connection or just a phone call to be in touch. And it's something I'm kind of paranoid about. I have so many other things to be worried about for the company that I don't know if I can address this. But as we are introducing technology and phones to people that may be first time users,
Mhm.
60 Hertz will not be the only app on that phone. And what do we do if we're
Right.
unconsciously encouraging a further phone addiction? I mean, I think that's incumbent on us to start addressing in our trainings, but we aren't quite there yet. Hmm.
I think there's a lot of addictions that society deems socially acceptable, and I think phone addiction's
Almost, I
almost one
think
of
so
them.
too. I think so too. Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
So exactly, can you describe to me what the interface, what would typical users see on the 60 hertz interface? Like, what is the goal of the application that they have on their either
Yeah,
tablet or
yeah. So
phone?
they open it up and there'll be, let's say, cards, maybe three or four cards that they can see with big font, color coding that is meaningful, an icon that's culturally or regionally appropriate, so that the house icon really doesn't always mean things to people. The mail envelope icon does not mean the same
I
thing.
see.
So we help with the configuration, identifying what those regional icons would be, and then tasks that they're responsible for, usually in words. It can be a picture or the icon only, although double affirmation is really important with our approach so that someone can read
Mhm.
a word in their native language and see an icon and have a color coding. So it's like, okay, this is definitely a high priority task that is due today that involves a wrench. I don't know, like those kinds of things. And then there's a little status bar so they can see in a circle view how much of that task has been completed already, or how, if they are they on step 1 or step 10 of a task that's they're responsible for. So that's kind of the overview agenda. Here's what I'm responsible for today. And then if they click into any of those, depending on their level of literacy, depending on their familiarity with the task, the complexity of the task, there are a range of subtasks. And it can be, just checking the box. Ah, that felt good. Okay, yes, I've cleaned the space. Yes, I've got proper lighting set up. Yes, I've recorded the following items for it, and then I've hit submit, and I've signed it with my finger because my signature is important. And then the workflow is such that when the app is connected to the internet, then that immediately uploads to what we call maintenance manager, the boss's view.
Hmm.
The app also is native, which means it doesn't have to connect to function online. And so the data could be stored until the individual wanders back closer to a Wi-Fi area or walks to someone's house with better Wi-Fi. Data then uploads. An area that we're really exploring and curious about. We had a phenomenal project last year in Suriname with Clean Tech Suriname and our good friends at Energy Tech, and they make a solar battery, really lightweight, easy solar battery system. And so they said, can you do a lower literacy, a picture only installation guide for our solar battery system?
I was gonna ask
Yeah,
about
it was
that.
so fun. It was just tremendous. It's like the drawings are so darn simple. Somebody would say, "Well, I can do that. I can replicate that. I'll just do it." But it was as a result of we tested 4 different design types: skeuomorphic, photorealistic, line diagrams, cartoons,
Mhm.
tested it extensively with a wide age variety and demographic of users. Turns out skeuomorphic worked best for this kind of explanation, and then went through 17 iterations of the installation guide to teach people. It's so interesting. Like, how do you call out what's important on a piece of hardware? It's like, especially if there are lots of dials, as we mentioned earlier, you're like highlighting in red and don't turn it or do turn it, or this is actually on the box, but you never need to interface with it. There are all of these different ways. And then it's also hard. How do you explain priority or angle? So like, only turn this first, or if you need to line the panels up with the sun, how do we illustrate the angle? Or if we, there are other, another important thing was color coding. Red, yellow, and green are just practically unquestioned in the developed world. What we all know how to derive meaning from those colors, but that's not universally the case, and particularly in a place where people may not have ever driven a car. And so what color suite do we standardize around? Or if you think, okay, national colors, let's go with the country's national colors. Well, if your regime, if you live in a country that has had civil war for a number of years, those national colors really may not be that comforting or helpful to you. So these are the kind of style decisions that with our guide, we think through and work with our customers to create.
What does an iteration of one of those 17 redesigns look like? Like, how do you know the V3 isn't good enough, we need a V4. V4 isn't good enough, we need a V5. Like, how do you know when it was good enough to make it? I guess we're satisfied with this for now, and we're going to move on to something else.
Okay, so let me tell you about one of the images. We wanted to compare, how do you explain when the battery is almost drained? So in your mind, you can see that there'd be like a little horizontal battery, and we would all depict it with a percentage of the bars decreasing, because we are so used to unconsciously seeing that on our cell phones every single day. Well, for these users, that wouldn't have mattered, and so we tested a range of things. What we knew that the community used speedboats to get up and down a river, which is not unlike what we see in Alaska too. So there was a depiction of a speedboat at full tilt, where the nose of the boat was way up in the air, and then like also back down, fully on the water. That didn't work for the users, even though we thought it might be a good idea. And then we had, kind of another iteration about like an animal hopping quickly versus slowly. I can't even remember where we landed with it, where it ultimately fit, but we workshopped it internally as well as with our contact in Suriname. And then ultimately he deployed with the villages a paper prototype. And then we're continuing to iterate and go back out to field to see what the users raise their eyebrows on. A favorite tool, something that we haven't done yet, but I'm super excited, is to put GoPro cameras on our users as they are looking at the guide and then doing the installation to see where they're pausing or to see what they do backwards and understanding from there.
What's holding you back from
COVID
doing that?
at this point? We haven't had a chance to. COVID would be the way to deploy it, but many of our customers or rather, I should say, the GoPro would be the way to get over the COVID pause. But our customers haven't been able to be at site.
Okay, I see. So in these, I guess these like walkthroughs, what are you looking for if you were to observe someone interact with?
Yeah, so when we know that. A couple of things. If someone has not learned how to read, and I don't want to say that all of our users are illiterate by any means, but this is the base use case that we're designing for. Then the ability, there's something about learning to read left to right, or whatever your language is, right to left, that tracks with our ability to process information. And so as someone has missed acquisition of that mental framework to process content, it can make it challenging to acquire something. So if you didn't know how to read and I was trying to teach you how to change the oil in your car or change a tire, like you might watch me do it and it would just kind of go over, it wouldn't be that absorbed. And this is true even for, us book learners. We learn 10% formally and 70%, by actually doing it. So that's just as important in this context where the individual really needs to get on the ground and try it themselves, and then better yet, teach someone else. So watching for how long it takes a user to sort through, like, do they hesitate? We did an example of a very simple set of instructions to test one of the diagrams of pouring rice from 3 bowls, from one big bowl into 3 little bowls, and then arranging them. It was like a 5 or 6 step instruction process. And it was so fascinating. I worried it was too simple. I said, I don't think we're not really going to get good content. This is too simple. It wasn't. It wasn't. People still struggled,
Um,
or then people would like pour the rice in the wrong way or get the wrong quantity in. They weren't sure to take it literally. If I show you 3 spoons of rice from the big bowl into the small bowl, that's not a suggestion. You need to put 3 tablespoons in. But people just took that as to mean some tablespoons in. Or if you need to
oh,
return the bowls to the right configuration, how do you do that?
hmm.
Or what counts as the finalized state? So just really watching when a user questions or pauses, and then how confident do they feel about the end result.
Would you happen to know the literacy percentage in, I guess, literacy as defined by understanding conventional American English as well as American cultural norms
Oh my
in
gosh, it's
imagery?
a fascinating field of study, and there we are inspired by work that a researcher at Microsoft is doing, and then as well our colleagues at Navana Tech. I should say the Microsoft researcher, if anybody wants to look up her papers, is Indrani Medhi, Medhits, and she is forerunning on this. And then similarly, Navana Tech, colleagues at Navana Tech are doing things with digital voice assistant and helping with financial apps in India. So
Mhm.
it's fascinating. In terms of that actual percentage, I have not seen a number. I mean, we do know in the United States that 20% are not reading at a fourth grade level. And so it's easy to think like, oh, we've all got this, but I mean, reading skills are really falling behind in our own country too.
Hmm. So I guess what is the design of the battery icon now in its 17th or 18th
Yeah, we
iteration?
did fall back to color coding to we said, because then the thought came, well, wait, actually, we're doing people a disservice to try to teach them with speedboats and bunny rabbits what their battery means. Like, this is digital literacy. This is creating a fluency. This is becoming
Hmm.
the vocabulary word, the vocabulary image that people should have. So we went back to the conventional battery icon, but did do some color coding that we tested and found that that would work for people. And then, as I recall, we did create a kind of a stand-in, a parallel, a visual metaphor. We created a visual metaphor to understand what those battery color coding, what they corresponded with in terms of a percentage decrease.
It's so interesting to see how examples like the green, yellow, red is so ingrained in almost everyone I know, and like at
Yeah,
least personally know. But I do recognize if you once you go to like if you go to like remote parts of the world where they've never seen a street light, maybe it doesn't
it
really
doesn't
make
make
sense.
sense. It just, yeah. I mean, have you done work in emerging markets or with other cultures related to any component of? Um,
Never for work, just for
okay, yeah,
volunteering. I've been to rural Vietnam. So I'm of Vietnamese origin. My parents wanted me to experience rural Vietnam because that's similar to
yeah.
what their upbringing was. So I got to go visit it. Could not do a single thing if it weren't for my parents because I don't speak the language fluently enough to communicate meaningful interactions. And I think that the thing that stood out to me the most was these like
Mm,
shelters that people lived in were literally just like like sheets of
yeah.
metal arranged in a rectangular prism of some kind, and they just like I don't even know if they like duct taped it. There's just like literally it just happens to be standing in its like current orientation of like I don't know positioning, and I'm pretty sure there were no streetlights there. I'm pretty sure education, especially like English education, is non-existent. It's just a different world.
Such a different world. Wow, I love that you've had that experience. That really that says so much too. I mean, just I think even a touch of awareness about how other people are living, because the difference can be so great. It opens so much imaginatively
Right.
for us too. And it kind of with between the lines, what you just said makes me reflect on kind of another existential question that I'm asking myself lately, which is for places that are new to have electricity and new for electrification. The notion of selling what's called beneficial appliances or beneficial electrification is that, okay, great, if you bring electricity to a community, then do they just like illuminate one dim bulb, or you improve life by also having additional
Right. Right.
things at the site? And so, if that is a refrigerator or a ceiling fan or an ice maker for at a commercial scale for a community, um, a radio, okay, great. I feel good about all of those beneficial appliances. But as soon as people are talking about installing a television, then I have an emotional response to that because I see, I'm like, oh, great. So we're like spending all this money and effort to bring like Baywatch to the
Bad, bad,
area.
yeah,
Like, I
bad
mean,
TV
it's
too.
horrible. If you've ever, I'm sure you've experienced this in your travels. Like, we export the worst of American TV. I mean, what you're going to get on a channel there is just the worst. It's such a caricature of our own culture and how horrifying. But it's like, okay, well, do you not electrify because I was offended by
Right, right,
you
right.
know?
So I do recognize that 60 Hertz is a software company. What percentage of your company's efforts is focused on the software and interactions with the software versus the adjacent parts of the business that support the software?
Can you say a little bit more about that or give an example? Do you,
Oh yeah, sure. So you just mentioned the example of bringing electricity to more remote areas. I imagine part of that furthers your missions of just powering more or control, facilitating more microgrids.
uh,
So I imagine a part of it, your business model or something constructed to your business model, whether you actually partake in it or not, is bringing more microgrids to the
yeah,
world. Is that something you
we're so
focus on?
sympathetic. We're so empathetic with our developer customers. I feel like it's us actually building them, but it really is our developers, those that choose to work with 60 Hertz, that elect us as a
I see.
vendor, that are doing that deployment. But we love to say we are supporting them. I mean, they are doing the really hard work. What it takes to bring power to 20 new communities in Benin, for instance, is way different than what it takes to build a software platform. That said, it is also very hard. And as my co-founders and I love to say, being tech, we are not technical. We just thought, oh, if you can order a latte with an app, then how hard can it be to build a maintenance app? And we now know how hard and expensive it is to build a maintenance app. But yeah, so it is a different kind of problem. But our focus really is on the software. However, expanding to understand our use cases so that if developers are saying it'd be great if we could maintain this fleet of radios or this fleet of TVs, then that's certainly part of our learning and discovery. We're working also, we're back in North America. We're really curious right now about rural electric cooperatives. There are 900 co-ops in the U.S. It's a really fundamental part of our utility landscape. A lot of people are not getting power from an investor-owned utility like PG&E or something like that. And co-ops it's just a beautiful part of our country, I really think, in terms of how we electrified the United States, even dating back to the 1920s. And so these institutions, these utility companies are very much about, power in remote places, increasingly telecom in remote places too. So we're testing out the applicability of our software for things like maintaining distribution lines, cleaning up vegetation, or increasingly managing these massive fleets of battery solar projects. As a utility says we want to be 100% renewable by fill in the date, then the way they're going to have to do that, if not through a new contract with a generation, with their generation plant, is through a lot of Tesla power packs and you name it. It's going to be a lot of these, and that's
Right.
one of the guys we talked to was like, I'm going to become an inverter maintenance company because all he's doing is like dealing with these inverters all over their service territory, and that's what we hope to help him with. But interesting side effect.
So when I think of most SaaS companies' growth, I think of almost a very narrow set of activities. It's either Facebook ads, Google ads, email marketing, like cold calling people, LinkedIn automation. Like there's some very standardized, like common set of marketing tools that almost universally work, or at least one of these will universally work, including relationship building. How do you find your customers and how do you attract them to your platform?
Yeah, we've been testing. We've done a lot of traction channel, and this would be an appropriate moment to insert my my favorite advertisement for that book, Traction, by Gabriel Weinberg. And yeah, I
Oh, I
love
love
that
that
book.
book.
I like
Yeah.
have it like annotated and marked up, and I wish I'd bought my fresh copy instead of the $3.99 Amazon like good enough quality book, but but I've given it a lot of love. So yeah, that Traction book we really took as a Bible, and did a lot of testing. Of course, billboard ads are for our niche market didn't get testing, but so two interesting things on our digital strategy. Of course, I just feel for people that start t-shirt companies because getting found online is like good luck. There is so much competition, and even for like energy asset maintenance management software, there still is a lot of competition. We've found great luck outside of the U.S. Our cost per click in the U.S. to even make it to like the top page rank would be $9, which is astronomical for a startup at our scale, but we can reach a lot more folks outside of the US for $2-3 a click. So we're still doing that, but I'm losing my thrill for it. We are losing our thrill because it's just like such a low rate of return, and then you finally get somebody who is a qualified lead in the pipeline, and like who knows if they're going to show up to the meeting on time and actually like close. So what has actually been a lot more effective for us in this very collegial word of mouth market, utilities, developers, original equipment, they all talk to each other. So for us, the big fish has been conferences and joining membership associations. That hands down has just, I speak wherever I can at conferences just because I love to share a story and also hear from others about what they like or don't like in their business and see if we can help. So conferences, memberships, and then kind of part and parcel with that is of course LinkedIn. Gotcha. Actually, I'm not sure. How did Fuse find 60 hertz? Your colleague reached out, but I don't know how.
Yeah, so there's tools like Crunchbase that like I talk about certain companies getting certain rounds of funding. I think we probably came across either I think it was probably from Crunchbase. Yeah,
because we just closed a round, so that was probably the. Can I just tell you, as long as we're talking about Crunchbase, and investors. So we've raised 2.7 to date, and I feel like I'm like military crawling my way across the floor to get every last dollar in. It's just like the hardest way to raise money. But so this last round, I announced I wanted we needed a $700,000 bridge. I announced in October of last year. And even though it was Q4 and everyone said you can't raise money in Q4, we needed to go forward. And also it wasn't such a huge sum and we had some traction. So we, felt like it was a reasonable ask. So for what, got initial interest right off the bat, things were looking good. I thought we'd close it by February and then hit some glitches or whatnot. All for the better. It improved the company. I'm so grateful for all the feedback that we got. But in the end, and then the round was oversubscribed. We closed 1.3, just over 1.3, about 3 weeks ago. But what was so fascinating with all of this to me was that it is a round of angels. I have, I think, 3 different angel funds, and ultimately 18 different angel investors that came in, which yielded a ton of pitches. I mean, I think I gave the pitch 47 times. But what I love and what I would actually recommend to anybody else too is that having that angel investment yields a lot of multipliers. And these are all like grandfather types, or at least that's who our investors are, they all could be my grandpa, or not all of them, but many, a few women. And that they are providing, I think, honestly, helpful insights, not everything, but helpful insights. And then they all know 20 people that they're like, have you talked to so-and-so, or can you reach out to so-and-so? Because to be an accredited investor, they've built something for themselves, and are going to have a network that is valuable. And I don't know, I took some heat. People are like, oh, it's the most inefficient way to raise money. And I'm not saying it is efficient, but I really am banking on the upside of the network building and having all these folks rooting for us.
And a part of this show, one of our goals is to also invite some investors on the show and see what their perspective is. And we'd love to be the platform that helps connect companies and investors.
I hope you do. I think it would be really, we hear the pitch and whatnot, but I think getting investors that are not at that institutional level on a show would be just as valuable. And, there's a definite other tier of investors that can offer solid advice and know what they're doing. This is the other thing that I've picked up though, is it wasn't until the end of the round that we started talking with true SaaS investors or angels that were also SaaS investors. And I wish I'd gotten savvier to that earlier, because the metrics that they're looking for, what they're encouraging us to be accountable about, really differ from those that made their money in the restaurant business, or those that know a lot about a B2C brand or something like that. So, yeah.
And there's definitely a lot of them, but did you find all of them through personal connections?
Yeah, kind of. And then we had a couple of lucky breaks where some big multipliers loved the idea and were able to join another angel group. Just have to give a shout out to a guy named Alex Rosenfeld from Climate Impact Capital, who we just are so grateful to be working with. But he networked us with a lot of other angels that ultimately bore fruit. And then I just participated in a number of pitch events, and then reached out and filled out forms, and Clean Energy Venture Group joined, Sea Change Fund in Seattle joined. And then really the most meaningful right off the bat was the Alaska Investor Network, which Alaska has a pretty nascent startup community. I mean, we're like, you're kind of looking at it. There are 4 or 5 others of us. Interestingly, a ton of female founders, a disproportionate number of female founders, which is great. But the Alaska Investor Network has not had maybe a number of companies that they feel they wanted to invest in, but we were sure grateful for their support.
Did you know that you'd have to pitch as many times as you did to get the capital you wanted?
And you know, I'm laughing only because one of my co-founders knows that I'm not very realistic about these things, and I was like, we're gonna have it done by December, and I was like, no, or I said we're gonna have it done by December. She was like, no. And I was like, I think it's going to be 4 or 5, 47 times later. And I think I probably lost count. It's probably even higher than that. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to make Series A hopefully look easy. Comparatively, probably not, but being optimistic again.
Well, I guess it comes down to the metrics. If the metrics are really, really good,
yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's so hard.
The metrics are the hardest part.
If we have an exit, I know exactly who I'm not going to invest in. You know, I know what it sounds like when someone's bullshit.
How do you get through, or do you feel like your personality type is like resilient to discouragement and disappointment?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that. No, there've been a couple. There were definitely some tears. Like this was not easy whatsoever. I think number one, in a way, maybe this is the Aspen connection, but talking with wealthy people is not intimidating to me. And I think actually I think founders need to give themselves a pep talk more and not feel that there is such an unequal power balance. Like, okay, they happen to be rich and they happen to be thinking about placing capital, but that doesn't make them smarter or more experienced. I mean, like they may also be smarter and more experienced, but I think we just need to like talk to ourselves about the relationship a little bit more. I think people love to be treated as equals and asked for their opinion. And frankly, I need to be coached. So that's a nice dynamic going into it. And then I'm getting a little thicker skin, I guess, about just like when people have big, bold assertions that will never work, or that's a bad idea. Or, sometimes you get that hubris in these early calls. I'm like, okay, I'm glad you feel that way, but I don't necessarily need to adopt that or take it on deeply. I think what is challenging, this happened in this round too, is getting the hopes up. Is where somebody will get infatuated with the concept of 60 hertz or whatever they think they're seeing here. And then, they like all of us sort of go back and think about it. But if there's been a lot of talk and a big game of like, I'm going to take the rest of your round, or I'm going to, wow, this is a company that's really going to go forward. And I'll make a big check. And then they don't, they can't make it to the next meeting. I think getting a little more sober myself about like not getting quite as excited. It's hard though.
It's interesting that you describe it as feeling like you're like people pitching are here and like the people with money are like here. Because I think in my mind, I see it as
really?
the reverse, where I feel like the people who are pitching, the supply and demand of ideas, I feel like there's way more capital in the world than there are meaningful and effective like executors of various like strategies. That's the way
I love that.
I don't know if it's like fun or not, but I think maybe I'm just like dumb enough and unaware enough that gives me the confidence to not worry as much. And it may not even be true, but I feel like it's a Dunning-Kruger effect. Like I'm not smart enough to know if I'm wrong.
No, I greatly value that. I greatly value that perspective, because I think we know if you're starting something, it is so hard to build something from scratch that is of value. It is so inestimably hard to build something of value, and until you've been through it, you don't know that. People don't know that, and so that's all the more pep talk to say, when you are approaching someone and you have an idea and an ability to execute, to really puff up and feel confident, still coachable, still humble enough to be coachable, of course. And I know I can tell that's how you approach the world too. But I just really appreciate that shot in the arm that you're providing of like the flow of ideas versus capital. That really is different.
I really feel like, especially when you think about all the old money in the world, there's like lots of like family money that's existed for, I don't know, who knows how many generations, that's just accumulated and accumulated. And you're running out of things to invest in. Like people generally look at the stock market and they just feel like the stock market has done really well in the past, I don't know, call it 3 decades or so for like X, Y, and Z reasons that are not replicatable in the next 3 decades, or at least some people feel that way. Whereas, and you see more people go to venture capital because I think generally venture capital, if you're willing to be patient enough and you don't care about liquidity, has better returns, assuming you are amongst at least the top 50% or some odd percent of VC
Wow, that's
firms.
fascinating. I think that really is true too about the returns on the market, especially given the current state of the market. It seems very volatile to me, or a little bit risky. So, pushing that money more toward. And I heard this. I joined an angel call early, and heard them bantering. Pardon me, heard them bantering with one another beforehand, and was struck by this guy being like, "Yeah, I've got 40 investments." And even if he's putting 10,000 in each of them, right, I'm not sure what the sum would be. I doubt it's too much more than that. Like, what a fascinating play that, like, the startup is effectively just a diversification strategy.
Right. And I feel like it's also interesting because I think the reason Warren Buffett is super famous as an investor is the fact that he's able to invest in something, influence its underlying value by through coaching, through consulting, whatever, and then he announces to the world that he's invested in something. So he has like multiple ways to increase the value of the underlying stock that he's purchased, and I feel that's such a cool thing. Like typical people, like I can't buy a share of Google and then influence the share of Google somehow. Like I'm just not at that level. But once you have that capacity to influence, even if you're a small scale influencer in a small niche community, for example, like microgrids, I can't name a single influencer in the
Well,
microgrid
you're looking
community,
at one.
but I imagine in that community, you're the first. You're the first.
No, but you're right.
I cannot name another. But if there was someone investing specifically in that vertical, they have a knowledge advantage, and I feel like that knowledge advantage, they have the network advantage, they have likely people are going to invest into them and give them money to invest on their behalf because of that
no,
advantage.
I think that's absolutely right. That's a fascinating dynamic because you can see where people are. That would be also what a data point that I derived from this angel round is the degree that it is social proof. That everyone is quite apprehensive about making their own decisions. So that's why they'll join an angel group, see if somebody they respect within the angel group makes a decision. And then furthermore, the round itself wasn't advancing. We worried we weren't going to make our $300,000 minimum at one point. And then 3 weeks later, we'd oversubscribed the round and had to go back to the board to double it. It was like that fast, which was quite an emotional roller coaster. And we knew that it was valuable. It was just that people were nervous. So I think it is just as you said, it's social proof through that Warren Buffett example too. But
Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, but I also want to be respectful towards
David,
your
thank you.
time.
I've really enjoyed too.
One of the longer episodes. Yeah, anytime. I like just to end all these calls the same way. What's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you?
I would welcome any feedback or a chance to talk to someone. So through our website, if you can't remember my email address, of course, the info at and 60hertzenergy.com is our website. So 60hertz energy is our web address. And then otherwise, it's my name, piper.wilder at 60hertzenergy.com.